Wow, here we are again, a Friday afternoon of Green Rush, the business of cannabis talk show. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometime host of this program. You know, this is the third holiday show we've done over the last 3 years, around the same time every year, the middle of December. Everybody is already looking around, making sure they have all their lights up and their trees in their various places in their house. And all my fellow Jewish friends have their menorahs out and their candles, which, by the way, you never, ever get them until like the night before. That's human. That's just human nature. This Friday, we are going to talk about the past and the future. That's right. The past, of course, was 2022. And I don't know what kind of a year you folks had, but I can't wait to get rid of this year and get on to next year. Okay. 2023 has to be better than 2022. That in mind, we are now introducing a new poll. So for the next couple of weeks, we're not doing any official, real new, original programming production. It's all going to be the best of Pro Cannabis Media, live streamed on our Roku channel, our Apple channel, and our website. So we certainly welcome you to check that out. And of course, everything's on demand on our YouTube channel as well. That being said, we are doing a poll on the top 5 news stories of 2022. And there are so many. Last year, I think we only had 10. And I saw about 15, maybe even 20. And we narrowed it down to 15. And now we're asking everybody to go online. I'm pretty sure it's info at Pro Cannabis Media, or you just go to the YouTube channel, because I'm sure right now Dan is pushing the public button, if he can, on that one video that I uploaded about an hour ago that has all the links to our poll in it. I'm pretty sure our newsletter is going out sometime this afternoon if it hasn't already. All that being said, we are welcomed once again on the third Friday of every month by Morgan Fox from Normal. And wait a second, Morgan. I know it's the holidays, and I know you're a great dad, as is the others on this particular screen. Where did she go?
Oh, she's laying down right now. That's
Okay.
the quietest that she could hopefully be, but y'all might see her eventually when she starts getting rowdy.
All right, fair enough. Doug Miller and Josh Kincaid are with us again for the duration of the program. I put out about 50 invites, people, so I have absolutely no idea who's going to show up after 4:30 up until 6 o'clock. And then, of course, at 6 o'clock, we'll run our last We Talk news of this year as we head forward and look forward to 2023. All right, so Morgan, the biggest question on our minds today, as you look at what's going on in Washington, D.C., is the fact that this poor safe banking bill has been tagged along. It's been talked about. It's been pushed aside. Is it dead for 2022 right now?
Well, before I get into that, I just want to apologize to your viewers in advance in case I have to dip out early because my 1-year-old is sick and is really dragging my attention quite a bit.
Good.
Her mother is super busy with work stuff as well. So if I have to dip out before the conversation is over, I apologize. But anyway, so the short answer is no. We are not done yet. The conversations around what could be included in the omnibus are still ongoing, and there is still the possibility of a standalone bill. But every day that passes makes me less optimistic. And honestly, I have to say that this represents like a huge failure in Democratic leadership for not using the power that they have had for the past year to actually push an incremental package forward and waiting until the last half of the year after CAOA was introduced to actually get something on the table and start having conversations about this. And, also, I think a lot of the weight rests on advocates too, for not being willing to engage with the GOP. Not being willing to figure out exactly what was a measure too far, not being willing to get enough people on board to pressure McConnell to allow cannabis policy reform to go through in any of the spending bills. the bottom line is that Mitch McConnell is really, really good at his job, and he's able to whip his party into shape. And if he thinks that something is out of line with what his ideals are, or he thinks that there's something that he can use to damage Democrats, he's going to use it. And he used it again, just like he used it in 2020. But he doesn't need to have that power. This is something that is universally supported across party lines. Obviously, more supported in some parties than others, but there's majority support in both parties for significant cannabis policy reform. And the fact that this has now become a trading issue really just means that McConnell has Schumer over the barrelhead on this. So Schumer is going to need to give up a lot outside of cannabis in order to get cannabis included in the omnibus. That being said, we still have the opportunity for a standalone bill, but the days are numbered. I mean, it is literally days.
Right. We totally get that. Certainly more optimistic than a lot of people in this industry. All we hear now is about doom and gloom for 2023. And that's a great segue into Josh Kincaid, who has spent some time looking at those numbers that support the doom and gloom. So Josh, welcome to the holiday show of Green Rush. Go ahead. You can introduce, and of course, Doug, anybody can chime in when we go through your figures. I'm pretty sure Mr. Dan French has some of them ready to rock that I think he does anyway, but yeah, no, you're probably familiar with what you predicted. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, actually, this isn't my predictions. This is something I've been aggregating for like the last 4 years or whatever. So what I do is I go and I grab about a dozen different cannabis publications that have predictions, and I well, actually, here, let me just show you. How about that?
Yeah. You now have control of the show. Go.
So basically there's 12 different cannabis publications here. And so I categorize them based on their predictions for the following year, aggregate them all, and then kind of put them into a list. So in 2019, their 2020 predictions, for example, were that price for some of the publicly traded companies were going to be really important, and profit, of course, was going to start to become a lot more important. And then, 1/5 of the people thought something around regulations or legalization was going to pop. And then separate from that, I pulled out cannabis lounges, which never happened. Vapegate kind of fizzled away. Cannabinoids, new cannabinoids were the thing back when THCA, I think, was, or is that right? Is that when that was discovered?
THCO was out.
THCP, that was when THCP is when that came out. CBD was another one, and then medical educations and concerns. So not a whole lot. And then running through 2021, very similar stuff, except some of the concerns came in, some of the consolidation, too many companies, whatever, they were going to fold and consolidate. CBD still on there, cannabinoids. Remember the demand from COVID and how high the demand was? That sure fell off. Price and profit went from number 1 to number 6. I think people saw cookies expanding internationally, and they're like, "Oh, that's going to be a new thing," and hasn't really been a thing yet. People thought investment would surge, and it hasn't. Putting those kind of side by side and seeing kind of how things have shifted over the time, I think what we'll see is that in 2019 people didn't really know, and then people will start to have more and more opinions as the years kind of move on, and it'll get more categorized. In 2022, their predictions for this year were we're going to see a lot more legalization, new product innovations, which I don't think came true. I was at MJ BizCon, didn't see a whole lot of new cannabis product innovations. Cannabinoids and terpenes are still on the list. I think consolidation and M&As did happen. Saw Tilray and Hexo; those were huge. Brands and branding, I think, is still part of some of that cookies, and less about highest THC and lowest price point, more towards people finding out what brands they want. Investing, price and profit still there. Consumption lounges are important, but there's an interesting thing that there's so many opinions that I had to put in a random or miscellaneous category. people think banking and small business are going to be more important than MSOs. I think that's too early, but these are the industry predictions, if you will. You can kind of see over time they've gotten more, categorized and more opinionated. Not necessarily accurate. We're still waiting for consumption lounges. Small business, I think, was way too early. Banking is too early. Not enough product innovations. But as time moves on, I think next year you'll see very similar categories this year in just different orders.
Hey, Morgan, if you're still with us and not changing a diaper, what's your first reaction to some of these? And I don't see anything here that's really earth-shattering, newsworthy, if you will, because those percentages did go down, and more importantly, there's more categories now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the state of things right now, I feel like nobody really knows exactly what is going to happen, and any predictions have to be taken with a grain of salt. What I do know is that it is going to be extremely difficult to get any sort of cannabis policy reform through various committee heads in the 118th Congress, including and especially Jim Jordan. But that being said, I think that we have a lot of opportunities to move like small incremental stuff through these committees and potentially through to full legislation. But I think that this is really an opportunity for us to be able to dive into bipartisanship. For the last couple of years, we've had a relatively receptive House and a Senate that was at least like half receptive. And
Can we
now
put her in
we're
charge
going to be
of
in
the
a position
Senate,
where
please?
we're going to be in a position where we're dealing with a much more difficult political environment, and so I think that it's going to be incumbent upon advocates and the industry to really reach across the aisle and determine what we can get past. I think incrementalism is now going to be the name of the game because full descheduling, I think, is completely off the table for the next 2 years. And the challenge is going to be trying to get federal legislation that we think is going to be beneficial to the most people possible passed. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next year. I think a lot of people that have been working on the Hill are going to have to kind of rethink exactly what their strategies are, as well as start to start to work with people that they wouldn't necessarily have worked with before.
Are those the Democrats crying? Is that what they're doing? Is they're throwing their voice into your daughter there, or what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like, don't work with those Republicans. But they're, we're seeing a lot more Republican support in the House. The Senate is still really up for grabs, but there's a lot more, diehard prohibitionists in the Senate that maintain positions of power than there are in the House. That being said, we've got a bunch of freshmen that we can help to influence right now. We are going to have to be dealing with a whole bunch of new committee heads in the House that we're going to need to develop relationships with if we want to actually pass legislation or even to get hearings on it. But those options are within the realm of possibility. It's not completely shut out. Republicans are steadily realizing that this is an issue that their constituency supports. They're realizing that there are going to be political consequences if they act in an obstructionist manner or they ignore this issue. So it's really incumbent upon voters to tell their lawmakers that they want this issue to be prioritized.
Absolutely. And you are a superstar, Morgan. If you need to go and take care of your daughter, we certainly understand. It's the holiday season, though, and having that soundtrack. And by the way, every time I call Doug Miller, he's got the similar soundtrack. Although little Dougie is, a little different, though, Doug, right?
Yeah, we were at the aquarium today watching Scuba Santa float around.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
That's right, Scuba Santa. Where was I? Hey, great.
I wish that had been around when I was a kid.
Hey,
Me too. Half the stuff's cool.
I'm gonna throw out an idea, and then Morgan, I know you can take off if you want, but I'm of the opinion now that they weren't able to get anything done in this lame duck Congress. I think the Republicans now want to be the heroes to the cannabis community and figure out a way to make some money and introduce and lead the way as they take control of the House. And even though they're not in control of the Senate, they have their minority turtle in charge there that, you know, I call Mitch Yertle the turtle. I'm sorry.
Honestly, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, despite the really strong efforts on the House side to pass legislation, I mean, approving the MORE Act, approving the Safe Banking Act for, again, like the 7th time, the House has been doing everything that it possibly can to move legislation, and it's just continuously gotten caught up in the Senate. This is an issue that is the Republicans to steal. And if they are looking at the polling and looking at the course of history, if they're smart, they'll take it.
I know, I get it. Hey, that soundtrack is what the holidays are all about, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, by the way, Morgan, what's her name?
Her name's Rory McKenzie.
Rory McKenzie.
Hi.
Hey, Merry Christmas, Rory McKenzie, to you and yours. Okay, I know you're going to be a superstar because I know your dad.
Oh, say thank you.
Oh, yeah. Good luck to you. Hey, Morgan, really and truly, thank you for your commitment to this show every third Friday. It means a lot to me. I've always enjoyed talking with you, and I look forward to more good news in 2023. And if you get a chance, go into that poll and then give us your top 5 stories in cannabis. Trying to nail down 5 of them is not easy, and at least I don't think it is. So I'm interested to hear what viewers have to say.
Well, I mean, before I go, I mean, the year isn't over yet. The session isn't over yet. We still have an opportunity to get this legislation into the omnibus. We still have the opportunity to get it into a standalone if the omnibus fails. So for all your viewers out there, put pressure on your lawmakers, in particular the Senate. This game is not over yet. I know that everybody is kind of feeling a little bit down the dumps right now, but the game isn't over yet, and we should not give up until it is 100% done.
All right, I love that. It makes me feel much better to hear that coming from you in Washington, D.C., because I'm forever an optimist in the future, and the fact that we're even talking openly about the cannabis business in the United States of America in the same year that the president actually mentioned the word marijuana for the first time in my life. I've never heard a president of the United States use the word. Forget about the political ploy for a second. He used the word.
Well, the fact that cannabis policy reform is being used as a political bargaining tool by the ranking minority head and by the Senate Majority Leader is amazing. We've never seen that before. So,
right.
I think that alone is something to celebrate.
Celebrate life, celebrate your family now, Morgan. Will you please? It's 4:20 on a Friday afternoon. I don't need to fill in the blanks for everybody. Everybody knows we take our break around this time and play Shanty by Jonathan Edwards, because that's my version of the Waldos and 420 when I was growing up. Every time we heard the song Shanty, me and the boys used to step outside around the corner and out back. These days, maybe we'll even have public consumption at some point legally somewhere, right? In 2023. That's the kind of predictions I'm looking for. All right, Morgan, Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. And we Green Rush Live will be back with more after we listen to my pal Jonathan Edwards sing that favorite song of mine.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just you know, like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WS.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Hey, ho, ho, ho. Welcome back to Green Rush, the really live business of cannabis talk show every Friday afternoon on Pro Cannabis Media's network of social media platforms, our Roku and our Apple channel, and of course, also on our homepage as well. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm so happy to have a couple of guys alongside now that we can talk about the biggest stories in the cannabis space. One of them to join us is Rick Thompson. He is the executive director of Normal in Michigan. And Rick, you're also the host of the Jazz Cabbage Cafe that we live stream every Tuesday at 4
p.m. Eastern Standard. That's right.
There you go. So you know what? The 65-year-old brain remembered that. That's a good thing. Doug Miller's with us from Jersey. We've got Josh out in Washington State, and now we have Michigan. So as always, I love it when we can create a coast-to-coast connection through this amazing plant that is cannabis. So we are releasing a poll to the public, and we're really interested to see what kind of response we get, and also the opinions of people. What were the top 5 news stories in the United States of America for cannabis in 2022? Rick, this is a year that there was quite a few choices, weren't there?
Oh, and it's especially when you look at a national level, individual states have their own special interests, but there are some commonalities that we see among all the different states, either mature or emerging markets. And that's it's really noteworthy, I think.
Hey, Doug, I want to bring you in and talk a little bit about one of the newest states to open up adult use sales is New Jersey, where you live. I know that they managed to move a lot of the medical dispensaries and add in adult use in New Jersey. To me, that's a pretty big story, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a huge story in New Jersey when it went legal on 4/21. I think it was the day after 4/20 they did it, and yeah, the lines were just crazy. Right? I mean, we still have crazy lines. Like I actually live around the corner from Curaleaf, which was the first real big dispensary in the state, and they still have lines that are just insane. And yeah, and if you have a medical card, it's great because you can just surpass the long rec line and go right in, because medical has to be served first. That's part of the regulations in the state, in most states. And so yeah, you can, if you're fortunate enough to have your medical card still, you can just bypass the big lines, walk right in, and everyone looks at you like, hey, how'd he get in there? But it is definitely it's a great thing.
We in Massachusetts lived through that back in 2018, and now there are well over 250 dispensaries, although, oops, one failed today out in Northampton. They kind of overdid it out in Northampton with like 11 dispensaries within a mile of each other. Yeah, and Rick's shaking his head going, exactly. So no surprise, because this is all about a market correction, right, Mr. Economist Josh Kincaid?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably one of the top stories that I would put out there for some of that consolidation. And it's, I mean, a lot of it's going to happen that we're going to see. So if you look at some of the stories in 2022, that merger between Hexo and Tilray, I don't think that's going to work out long term. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But other stories, Constellation Brands, $1.1 billion write-off. Canopy Growth, they had to write down $2 billion. Aurora, they had a reduction in goodwill of $2 billion. So Morrison Coors had to sell their CBD beverage unit. I mean, all of those things are kind of canaries in the coal mine in terms of consolidation and having to figure that out in 2023 and beyond. In terms of consolidation and having to figure that out.
Absolutely. Oh, wait a second. So you can't do this. You can't do what I'm trying to do technically. I'm sorry. I'm back. Hi, guys.
What are you trying to do over there?
I'm just trying to get YouTube up so I can see the chat room, and I've got the monitors all moving around, and I got it on my iPad, and I still can't figure out how to get it. Oh, look, there it is. No, it is what
He
it
needs
is.
more.
So,
help.
I'll add on to what you were saying about Hexo, because I was actually looking at all the cannabis stocks today, and I monitor them all the time, but especially today, I just wanted to look at them. And yeah, Hexo is at 11 cents right now. I mean, it's so far in the basement, and this is where I love to honestly buy stocks. This is where I'm not saying to go out and buy Hexo. I would look at it, but I'm just saying I like them when they're down this far in the basements. These are the ones I'm looking at. And yeah, you have Cure Leaf at 498. I mean, it was just 7 something the other day. It was curling up off the bottom, but a lot of these stocks are just getting beat down. Maps, they just announced 25% layoff. And I just mentioned today, because I publicly stayed off stocks, Goldman Sachs just said they're going to lay off about 8%, I believe the number was, in 2023. So, and I was saying yesterday, I posted about how I spoke specifically about Hexo and was saying how, you know, the cannabis industry is definitely going to have a correction. And so it's just about every other industry. We're going to see some major layoffs come across the board in almost every sector. And cannabis is definitely going to get hard. There's a lot of money pumped into it for a long time. Companies are doing things. A lot of companies were just joining the forces because they were able to. And now, as you see things slow down and recessions and things of that nature be spoken about, you're going to see a lot more companies go under, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're going to try and avoid that as much as possible in the industry for sure. Rick, can you give us a state of the industry in Michigan? They too have had some closures. Am I right on that?
Oh, certainly. Of course, our numbers are up, even though we were slightly down last month. It was still within the margin of error when you consider that November had one fewer day than October. But we're still cranking out about $200 million per month and just moving in an upward direction. However, we have seen an awful lot of market correction here. You're looking at cultivation centers who are now cultivating less than their capacity simply because they don't have a market destination for all of the cannabis, and it's less expensive to let the rooms go empty than it is to fill and nutrient and water and light those particular plants. So we're also seeing retail consolidation. Mergers and acquisitions are crazy right now, with even some big players merging together in order to create mega chains. We had Live and Common Citizen, which recently merged in Michigan to create, I believe, a 35 dispensary chain. And that's relatively large for the Michigan market itself. So we are seeing, unfortunately, a lot of the invisible damage of what we talk about as the can apocalypse. Ty Volpo actually said that to me, can apocalypse. What we're seeing is individual states with small layoffs and small shutdowns that aren't really noticed. People are paying attention to the MSOs, but the real damage, I think, is happening every single day in these individual states where oversupply and a crashing price has just driven everyone out of business.
There you go. I believe we have old friend joining us, Aaron Goins, on the phone. Am I right, Aaron? I call it a phone because it's a Zoom call. I'm old. What can I tell you? Aaron, you're muted. And let me tell you, this guy, he sent me an email with his list of top 5 stories, and none of them were on my list because he analyzes the market with a fine tooth comb and a lot of experience. Aaron, are you there? No. Okay. We will continue to try to get him. Let's go back to the top 5 stories because I think this can carry us. Rick, I'm interested, rather than pick 5, can you pick the top story in cannabis this year? What do you think is the biggest story?
I'll tell you what I think is the biggest story, and I'm not alone in that. Cannabis Business Times in November said potency inflation by laboratories in America is a huge story. You know, in Michigan, we're experiencing this right now, where instead of growing the best cannabis, it's actually which laboratory do you go to in order to get marketability for your product. And in a world where deli style served in jars where you get a chance to really see the buds is a rarity and prepackaged cannabis is the norm, oftentimes the only thing you have to judge the quality of the cannabis is the cute picture on the outside of the package or some potentially inflated THC number on the backside. So we're really seeing that in a number of states too. There've been lawsuits against them. California's actually permanently banned one lab, and I know I think Colorado gave a 10-year suspension to another laboratory program. So it's becoming a problem on a national basis, and it erodes consumer confidence in the system, which means fewer people participate in the regulated market and they go back to their unregulated market roots and resources. And that's a hit that the industry just can't afford at this point.
I would also
The
say
whole
that
point of
that's,
the industry.
I was gonna say that's an issue that every market has as soon as they launch. Like in Washington, that was an issue, circa 2018 when it was a pay to play. Like, how high do you want your percentages? And some of the ones in Washington got kicked out. And I think as we're starting to see a lot more states, regulating cannabis, you're going to see a ton of opportunistic labs out there in a pay to play system.
That's certainly the case in Michigan. We have a very famous lawsuit continuing to go on now for, I think it's in its second year, of a particular lab suing the state because they issued a huge recall, and then a judge overturned half the recall and said that it wasn't warranted. So there's just huge concerns right now. And again, the market itself is not picking winners and losers. It's who's willing to fudge numbers that decides winners and losers. And that's just so unfair for all those people that have put their life savings and their time and effort and love and sweat into this industry.
We're seeing a lot of people that dry out their cannabis too, to drive up those THC levels as well. And it's, eventually I think the market has to kind of work its way out. Like that's what I like about limited license states like Nevada is, in theory, you're supposed to have really good quality because there's so few out there. That's not my experience, but in theory, I like the idea.
I like when you said that's not my experience. That's fantastic, Josh. Thank you.
Speaking of experiences, I happened to be in a dispensary earlier this week talking to a bud tender, and it's interesting. I said, I'm just looking for a few pre-rolls. And he goes, well, this one has the highest amount of THC in it, and then followed by this one and this one. I said, what I said to the guy is, so what you're telling me is all consumers basically come in looking for the highest THC percentage in the particular flower. And anybody who's savvy enough to know anything about this plant, that doesn't necessarily mean it gets you the highest, people. It's all about the terpenes steering them, right, guys? And
yet you can't order by terpenes in Washington. After 10 years, you still don't have that option, which is crazy to me. I can still have this little gauge about what THC percentage I want, or I skew by high levels of THC, but I can't pick the terpene I want, which is going to give me the effects I'm looking for, which is crazy to me that Nevada's there and Washington is not.
Yeah, I particularly never really look at the percentages, and I've been traveling around to states with dispensaries for a while now, and yeah, that means absolutely nothing to me. I like to look at it, and like you said, now it's going to pre-packaged. So before, they would have the beautiful glass jars with the magnifying glasses, they'd let you smell it. It was great. And now it's just becoming like big box store stuff, and it just stinks. And yeah, the quality, last time honestly I was out in Colorado, I go snowboarding once a year out there, and I like to go dispensary hopping and have fun, and that's what I call it, dispensary hopping. And I like to check out all the product in the different areas, and I was actually disappointed in the flower the last time I went out there. I honestly went to the concentrates because they're much better, but yeah, I'm more of a flower connoisseur, and I was disappointed. And it's like that. And I'm not gonna lie, New Jersey, our dispensaries just aren't up to par yet. They just, you get better stuff on the streets, and it's sad. And like you were saying about the whole testing thing, I'm very familiar. I was actually going to start a testing lab, and I have a company, so we've done this before. We've sent it out to 3 different labs to have tested. We've had 3 different results come back. We know for a fact, we've said it for 2-3 years now, that the testing's just nonsense, because all the equipment is so different, and it just doesn't give you accurate results in this industry right yet. They can get it better, but the results just aren't accurate. I mean, Curaleaf tries to say they have 32% THC in their flower, and they're insane. They can't even get 20%, and they sell moldy flower very often, so they're not getting 32% anywhere. And
right. Hey, Rick, I got to interrupt you, Doug. Hey, Rick, I know you're a connoisseur of this because I've watched your show, and you're not afraid to light up on camera, which I let you get away with. But that being said, are you still seeing? Is this more of a new market correction? And back in the day, the legal market is supposed to push out the legacy market. When we were all in the legacy market, Was it good shit or not? Did it get you high with 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits? That's how I measured it back in that day, right? Now it's the THC content and the testing, and that's my rant for this this segment. Go ahead.
But as consumers, we help the legacy market drive better cannabis into our bodies, because we were able to evaluate it with our eyes, with our nose, with our fingers. We were able to touch a nug, squeeze it. Is it spongy? Did they use PGR hardeners on it? Is it like rock-like, which is always an undesirable aspect in my mind. But I don't really think that the purpose of the legalized market is to supplant the unregulated market. I think the unregulated market is a part of American culture, and it's unlikely to go away. Remember, we had all the king's horses and all the king's men try to prohibit cannabis from being prevalent in the United States, and all it ever did was make the quality better, the quantity available better, and the price go down. So it's a fantasy to think that the legalized market is ever going to supplant the illegal market. It's all about percentages. Can the regulated market seduce a certain percentage of the unregulated market in? And the way that they do that is by offering better quality cannabis. Doug's right. I've been to other states, and I have not had super great respect for the cannabis that I see produced there. My old school friends here in the state of Michigan, they get the sticky icky. Come on now.
Honestly, I have a buddy in Michigan, and they do have, and I know for a fact that dispensaries have been having a huge problem with like all the cartridges, the distillates, everything out there has just been a nightmare for the last, I guess, 5-6 months at least. And Michigan has some great growers in the market, which is for a good 2 years. It was just absolutely it was one of the best markets in the whole country, but it definitely stopped.
Part of the problem here is that when you have bean counters in another state deciding what plants you're going to put in your garden, simply because they yield the greatest amount of pounds per square foot or pounds per lumen applied, whatever metric they want to apply in their garden to determine success, instead of letting the people on the ground decide what the market's looking for, what's going to give you the best bag appeal. When those decisions are made by bean counters instead of real gardeners, I think we all lose, and the quality of the product goes down substantially, in my estimation.
I believe last show I was saying how every time I go out to a dispensary, if they have Blue Dream, it always looks great, and it's always a strain I get because it's always solid, no matter. And you get indicas and sativas in it, but it's always a solid strain. And like you just said, people they're not even growing it really anymore. You barely see it, and it was just so prevalent everywhere, and then it just disappears, and then you get all these new flavors like the runces and this and that, which is fine. I don't mind, but keep the good ones around because they're good for a reason, and they just disappear. And again, it's because you see these boutique growers, they just end up getting weeded out, so to say, by the big companies, and it stinks because it's not fair. They're the ones that really they put the groundwork in for the industry, and then people with big money just come in and roll right over them like a steamroller. It's terrible.
Well, craft growing, I think everyone in every legal market has recognized, actually grows some great stuff, if you will, and puts the MSOs to shame, at least in a head-to-head, competition or comparison. But are we just seeing typical free market stuff, guys, where the quality is always going to be recognized by those who are consuming it?
Supply demand.
Where are my economists? Go ahead.
But supply demand is really what's going on right now.
Right.
You're looking at the suppression of pricing, and the supply is through the roof here in Michigan, and therefore the price is now under $100 an ounce as an average retail price, $95 an ounce in Michigan for adult use and $102 an ounce for medical. And I don't know if that's the lowest price in the United States. There's probably places that have a lower average price. So it's just insane right now.
I heard
go ahead, Josh.
Well, I was just gonna say, I heard at MJ BizCon in Vegas recently that less than $200 for a pound of cannabis was what that was going for. So the price compression that we've seen in the last 12 months is 50%. It's come down 50%. And that's for two primary reasons. One, the cost of capital If you're a small company, you're not going to get an advantageous loan rate, and then they can't afford the cost of scaling and automation. And so you're seeing that kind of play out in terms of quality. I think the other big reason too is the lack of experience. Like, really, when have we had this scale of cannabis being grown and all of these people calling themselves, quote, master growers? It never existed before. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't have a best method or methodology. And I think all of that kind of encompasses this learning experience that unfortunately we have to ride along the ride with them until it gets better.
And from a business point, I don't understand how the growers that grow great cannabis, and we need them growers because that's how you really make the really good medicinal products. And that's what I'm really into, is helping people medicinally. And without the great growers that grow the best cannabis, you're not going to make the best medicinal products to help people. And they can't afford to actually grow because the business model, I mean, people don't understand how expensive it is to really grow a plant like the cannabis plant, to grow it the way the top shelf growers can grow. And yeah, of course, like Leaf can throw up a warehouse and throw a bunch of plants in there. But again, and like you were saying, everyone's a master grower. I say all the time, they need to get someone out west. You can tell they have an East Coast grower in there, and it's just garbage. I mean, I don't want to say that, but it's the truth. And it is.
I had to stop growing when as soon as it hits $3 a gram at wholesale, even retail, I had to stop growing because it got too expensive. And there's kind of, I'm regretting that choice. Because some of these other alternatives are super sub quality. It's an inferior product, but being frugal, I kind of went with the wholesale price, and I've been writing that quality down with it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I wish we had the business model, and of course the next year is definitely not going to be the business model for these guys to be growing quality product. It's going to be get by with whatever you can, and I hope some of them really make it, because there's some really talented people out there, and it's sad that they just can't really do what they want to do and should be able to do.
No, what's really a shame is that it seems like each state is having to relive the same nightmare other states have gone before. Yeah. It's as if we're not learning from anybody else's experience. And perhaps that's because every market has a natural evolution that is inescapable. Could be this boom bust period that we're seeing is just part of what those market economics are. That's what Jimmy's original question was. Is this just part of a regular functioning market, or is this something so unique to cannabis because of its federal illegality? And maybe it is just the typical way that these markets respond when they evolve.
I would say that it's maybe that, but I think also it's a massive amount of ego in this industry, and people are so inundated with what's going on and what they think, and they're incapable of looking for advisors or experience because they know everything.
The bro society, yeah.
When you look at failure, that's what's going to lead you to success, right? It's nothing less than learning from those opportunities. And in Oregon, for example, a phenomenal concentrate company and flower and retailer, they've all gone out of business. And all of it is because of infighting. They wanted to expand, or they wanted to do this or whatever, and then they just crumbled. And I think that's something that we don't really analyze enough of, and how to avoid that. There's plenty of other things, but I think there's a lot of distraction and ego involved that doesn't even allow people to filter through those experiences to learn from the failures in order to become successful.
All right, I'm going to put you guys on the spot now to pick. I'm going to read the 15 nominations, the 15 stories, okay, that are on our poll, okay? We want to know, you could pick 5, you could pick a different one. And I may have not, based on the conversation we've already had, I know I've missed a few here. Wait a second. There we go. All right. Was it President Biden's proclamation that cannabis is scheduled wrong and the laws should be reframed? Or the U.S. Congress passing the cannabis research bill, an opportunity unanimously? New Jersey opens for adult use on April 21st. 2 more states legalize cannabis for adult use at the ballot box, Maryland and Missouri. And then, of course, the other side to that is 3 states turned down cannabis reform at the ballot box. I did put this in here because anybody who watches this show and knows my background, I'm a sports guy. What can I tell you? Mike Tyson releases ear edible line, and Evander Holyfield is involved with it. I had to throw that in there. P. Daddy's acquisition of 3 MSOs and 12 dispensaries in 4 states for social equity help as far as building capital up. And then, another big one came full circle in 2022. Brittany Griner getting arrested in Russia for hash oil vape cartridge and subsequently released after over 250 days in a Russian prison and penal colony. I threw Vermont opens adult use sales just because I like Vermont. Okay, New York issues their first social equity licenses for adult use operators. Federal ruling on native resident licenses in Maine. Is this an opportunity to open interstate commerce? This is David Rabinowitz's baby, and I think he might be joining us a little bit later on. California reforms their cannabis laws to ease business restrictions. Curaleaf's federal wrongful death lawsuit for mislabeled CBD causing a death. Oregon governor releasing 45,000 nonviolent cannabis prisoners. I think that might be expungement, not release. But anyway, let's keep going because I've only got 2 more. Trulieve employee dies from respiratory issues on the job in a Holyoke grow facility. And last but not least, safe banking bill gets removed from the national defense budget and gets blasted by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who we affectionately call Yertle the Turtle. All right, Rick Thompson, can you pick one? What's the biggest story?
Well, out of the ones that you just offered, I'd have to go with the ones that actually did something, which would be, the first passage of federal research grants. As far as I'm concerned, that helps to open up the dialogue. I was really disappointed to hear Morgan earlier today talk about how it looks like the descheduling conversation is dead for another 2 years until we perhaps get a change in composition of the House of Representatives. That's really sad because I think that's an important way to go. But the research bill, that's a monumental piece of legislation. Biden's proclamation really didn't do a whole lot. It was symbolic, and I love what he did, but it didn't help as many people as it could have. And it's a half step when a full stride was warranted.
Yeah. All right, Josh, which do you think is the #1 biggest story in the cannabis world this year?
The biggest buzz I've seen all year out of all of those stories has been the 2 states, Mississippi and Massachusetts, right?
Yeah,
Missouri
with 2 states.
Did I say Mississippi? I meant Missouri. Sorry.
Yeah. So Maryland and Missouri, there were the 2 states that voted. Yeah. But you were close. I mean, they were both in the same country. So
yeah. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of interest. A lot of real estate investors are kind of coming out of the woodworks. And so I think whatever investment on the sidelines was there is kind of anytime that there's news, right? All of these stocks and all of the investors kind of move with the news. So that kind of got the drum beat going a little bit. We'll see how long it lasts.
Okay, Doug, you're last.
All right, I'll be biased because
you could be biased. It could just be New Jersey.
I was going to say it's New Jersey just because I live here, but also I think it opened it up more for New York to get their act together to pass it along. And I think that had a big part of it because they saw what was going on in New Jersey and people were coming over here and everything was crazy and they just had to get it together. And people were just in New York, they were literally opening up illegal shops and just selling whatever. They had vans driving. It was just absolutely out of control mayhem and they had to do something. So that's why I'm going to be biased and say that.
There you go. And actually, and there is a line for other, just for the record in this poll. So if you don't believe in any of our 15 choices or my 15 choices, if you will, you can certainly add your own into it. And we'll score them all up and we'll see which 5 come out on top. And then we're going to draw a couple of names, emails that we're going to get. And I've got some gift cards over here and I've got some what I call limited edition T-shirts, because I'm running out, available to give out as well as prizes. But more importantly, it's a good exercise, I think, for everybody to talk about it. And one of the things, I think Josh and Doug, you were both on the show with Gary Santo, the CEO of Tilt Holdings, and I talked about what we need is not legalization or decriminalization, it's normalization. And normalization is only going to occur when the public is educated about this product. At least this is an accepting of it. You know, all the NIMBYs out there, not in my backyard, who blocked the opening of dispensaries in their neighborhoods, and all the other side of things might be saying, well, you know, what about this? What about that? I mean, always looking for reasons to not get it done and delay it rather than figuring out a way to make it work for the industry and for the public safety. Because that's, you know, again, we can't even get safe banking passed. It is so amazing to me that the House of Representatives did it 7 times and the Senate doesn't even want to talk about it. It's amazing. I'm sorry, I rant. And what do you think, Doug? As usual,
I think that's politics at its finest, right?
That's politics at its finest. Josh, and look at Rick. Yep, right.
And it's so sad. It's held over all the people that are involved in the industry. It's held over everyone's head that they have to play political games, and it's all politics. I ran in the local election. I learned a lot, and I learned politics, it's everything. It's crazy. It makes and breaks every single thing. It's either money or politics.
Yeah, and
only
cannabis,
2 things.
And cannabis is now a pawn. I mean, Rick, we live to see that day at least. I mean, I'm amazed by this, the whole thing.
Well, it seems like drug policy has always been a pawn of one person or another, whether it's used to punish communities of color or whether it's used to make safe communities of security and fences and walled gates. But nowadays, people actually want us instead of trying to get rid of us, and that is kind of a culture shift. But I still don't see the love in the federal system. I know Morgan's has worked with the Republicans, but they've been the biggest stoppers of legislation for decades. So it's so difficult to put those old rifts aside and walk side by side with someone who you really do need to be your ally instead of your long-term enemy.
Josh, last word before we take a break.
Well, I wonder how much of it is lobbyists. Does anybody even care anymore? I think there's probably enough opposition from lobbyists who get a 20,000% ROI or return on their investment, ensuring that cannabis does not get passed, rather than these individual senators. I don't think they care at all.
No, well, that's why they're not doing any research on it. That's, to me, that's just being lazy and not doing due diligence, or more importantly, not doing your job.
And pharmaceutical companies are they're in both sides of their pockets. They're donating to the political parties. They're the lobbyists fighting against it. They're just, you're absolutely right. Lobbyists do have a
But to be fair, though, they don't need any more research, because Nixon already did the research, presented it, and they were like, "No, forget it." And then there is patent 6630507. There's already a patent. They don't need any more research. This is kicking the can down the road. It's just symbolism, and that's all.
I'm going to kind of disagree with you there, but I'm not going to bring it up now. I want to bring that up at the break and see who we might have coming in the room. Rick, can you hang out, or do you have to go do Christmas shopping or something?
Lonely old man has plenty of time. Sure.
All right, great. Love that. Welcome to the club. All right, we're going to take our top of the hour break here and continue with this holiday edition of Green Rush Live. Don't go away.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is your rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years, and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young, and you're probably wondering, what am I doing on a growing show? After all, I'm a convicted plant killer. That's why I surround myself with these beautiful plastic babies. But now I have found the secret to all those people out there who just don't want to deal with growing a plant indoors or outdoors. You just don't have enough confidence. Hey, check out greengoddesssupply.com. That's where you'll find the Armoire system. Basically, it's growing for dummies like me. Check it out. The Armoire at greengoddesssupply.com. And welcome back to another really live Green Rush program, the Business of Cannabis talk show, every Friday afternoon here on the Pro Cannabis Media Network. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and also the host of In the Weeds, my regularly scheduled podcast that gets released every week or so. We also have an old friend joining us now in this next half hour, maybe even 2 old friends. When I first started this program, I needed somebody who actually knew more about business, any business, than me, which is not difficult, really, when you get right down to it. And I thought of my old friend, David Rabinovitz, and he is with us now in the Zoom room and on Green Rush. David, I'm glad you got the memo about the hats.
Thank you, Jimmy. Actually, I didn't get the memo, but I watched the first part of the show and I took off for 5 minutes to say, where's that damn hat?
There you go. And I'm glad you found it. You're joined by Rick Thompson from Michigan and Josh Kincaid in Washington and Doug Miller in New Jersey. David, if you have been watching, you know we've been talking about the biggest news stories in cannabis this year. Is it that court case, that federal court ruling that you think is the biggest because it could open up interstate commerce?
No.
Okay. Which one do you think it is?
It's the new court case. It's the one out of Oregon, Jefferson Packing House. Jefferson, when the case I was so excited about earlier this year was the one coming out of Maine, right? And I wrote the article that was on cannabis.net about how I see interstate commerce unfolding and that it would unfold in the courts. And you recall, I was eviscerated for that position back in April by a few folks who may remain unnamed right now. But as things have unfolded, the case went the way I predicted it would go in August. And then New York had an issue where a federal judge issued an injunction saying the dormant commerce clause applies to cannabis. And as I stated back in April, the way I saw it unfolding is some operator in some state would sue their regulator. And sure enough, in November, Jefferson Packing House sued the state of Oregon. I think that's one of the 2 biggest stories of the year. And the other big story, I think, is that the top 10 MSOs owe $507 million in back taxes. And if they paid it, only one of them could survive more than 10 months. That just shows you how fragile the industry is and how the really big players are standing on real thin legs right now.
Oh boy. So how's this 2023 prediction looking for you, Josh and Doug, as you guys look at the numbers? David, I know, looks at numbers all the time. Is interstate commerce really the key to success for this industry? Josh, I'll ask you that first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the lack of redundancies that you would have to have in the industry, especially for beverages, is going to make or break a lot of these companies. So having a regional facility where you grow in California and then you have a distribution company in Ohio or whatever is kind of the way that traditionally it works. Otherwise, you're just a local business. So if you're going to have interstate, you need to have all of those other advantages that come with that, like not having to duplicate every single effort you have in every state.
Doug, what do you feel about interstate commerce?
No, it absolutely is necessary. Just along with the federal banking, without the two of them, you just can't really survive an industry. It's just, I mean, they're trying, and like you said, all these big MSOs, they've had tons of money thrown at them, huge investors, and it's just so many things. There are just so many bumps in the road when it comes to the federal banking. Now you can't do that, so you get charged like crazy fees to do anything. You have to use cash. You can't use credit cards. It hurts people. And then when you go across the interstate thing, it's just like you were saying, Josh, these companies, they need to set up one way to do things. They can't just do them this way in New Jersey, the same way in PA, and try to run businesses that way. It's too much overhead is what's happening. They're trying to do it because they want to compete and they want to have the name recognition and they want to be in the industry. But at the end of the day, the business models just aren't set up for people to be lucrative at this point, and it's sad. It really sucks.
I think we may have another guest. Aaron Goins, are you out there?
I'm here.
All right, it's like the voice of God, Aaron. Okay, thank you for joining us. Will you please? I know you're having a little issue with your video. That's fine. We miss you, and we welcome you back to the program. You were a regular, really, with David and myself there for a few months. And what's your feeling? I know that you gave me a list of the top 5 stories, and none of them were on my list. So walk me through your predictions and your vision of 2023 in cannabis.
Well, the way I see it, so listen, I had this conversation over a year ago with a number of operators at a industry meeting here in Massachusetts, and I was the only one that brought up inflation and what inflationary headwinds are going to do to the consumer's pocket. And the look on the face of these operators was as if I was introducing a new concept that they never heard of before in their life, which may be in fact true. But I think my number one issue is the greater economic headwinds ahead of us. I mean, CPI is still elevated, it's still very sticky. The comps are going to get better on that year over year, but sequentially, is only down 1/10 of a point. So, CPI number is going to be here to stay for, I think, at least throughout 2023. What most people aren't even focusing on is the fact that the U.S. personal savings rate dipped to like 2.3% of disposable income, which is something we have not seen since 2005. So if you're an operator and not taking that into effect, that, real wage growth is not keeping up with inflation, the fact that the average consumer is now tapping into reserves, you have to have that on your radar and how you're going to adapt to that. So that's my number one. Number two, extreme pricing wars. We're seeing an ultra competitive, oversaturated municipalities in Massachusetts, such as Brockton. There's a few players in this municipality that have the ability to race to the bottom. The others are just not going to survive, in my opinion. Number three, which is very important, which you guys kind of touched on, is free cash flow from operations, and will it be sufficient enough in order to cover this enormous tax liability associated with 280E that these MSOs are sort of facing. And, if you do a quick sort of analysis on that coverage ratio, Air, TerraSend, Columbia, Acreage, Ascend, those are a few off the top of my head who are going to have some difficult times in 2023 in order to be able to cover their tax bill. And there's a number of other ones, but Air is the number one that's going to have problems with that. And I think number four, everybody celebrate delivery. But man, I think delivery is dead. And I hate to be that harbinger of death, but listen, I mean, just a model on delivery alone is a higher cost basis than that of a standalone dispensary right there. So you're dealing with, headwinds of gasoline and other aspects of it. But just the customer acquisition is 10 times harder for a delivery operator than it could be for a retailer. And even here in Massachusetts, I now see that one delivery operator has put their business up for sale. They have 5 brand new compliant vehicles, and they have inventory. They want a $3 million price tag, which is a ridiculous valuation. I don't know how much inventory they're having, so I don't know what kind of tangible asset I can attach to that. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to see that go away as well. And lastly, I think counterparty risk is going to explode. I mean, I kind of joked about FTX level, maybe not there, but it's not going to be that far off. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. You look out west at what's happening in California with a lot of these distributors and the heavy amount of counterparty risk that they're assuming. And at some point, that's going to implode and fold in on itself. So if you're in an eastern state, you really do not have to sit here and guess what's really going to happen, because a lot of this is already occurring on the West Coast. So if you are an operator who actually sits there and pretends that you're shocked, you should not be operating, because you can literally, this is the only industry where you can actually look regionally and see what the hell is going to happen to you in 6 months or a year from now. So I have no sympathy for anybody who is complaining in this environment. And the fact of the matter is, most operators are not forward thinking, and they just do not apply any type of analysis past today and tomorrow.
Rick, I kind of skipped over you. I want to bring you back in here and allow you to reflect on what Mr. Aaron Goins just kind of outlined for us.
Well, I will, but first, as far as interstate commerce goes, remember that right now it's an uneven playing field. The testing standards are not the same in California as they are in Michigan. THC testing policies are not the same in California as they are in Michigan. And you really have 28, 29 different states doing their own thing. So when you talk about interstate commerce, it's going to be a complete mess unless there's some standardization involved, because certainly cannabis that's produced in a state like Mississippi or Missouri may not meet the quality standards that happen here in Michigan. So it will still become a regionalized production scenario. But what Aaron talked about is all very real. I mean, we're looking at some very serious consequences for people who are not paying attention to what's going to come down the pipe. And we talk in Michigan about companies having to get lean and mean, cut staff, cut overhead, allow there to be extra capacity within your system because utilizing your full capacity hasn't returned that investment. But those are lessons people could take right now before the can apocalypse hits your state, and be ready for that, and be market prepared and actually better positioned to withstand that tumult that will be happening.
What was that big word? Canatropolis?
Yeah, can apocalypse.
Okay, apocalypse with canna. I get it. David, you and Aaron are cut out of the same mold when it comes to metrics and analyzing numbers. Is he right on?
Aaron and I talk about it regularly, so I think he is. So, but I want to respond to something Rick said. Rick, what'll happen is cultivators in the Northeast, most of them will go away. You can't grow the product indoors cost effectively and compete with product that's being grown outdoors on the West Coast. And when you consider like 70% of the beer market is the run-of-the-mill swill beer, right? That's going to be the same in cannabis. So you'll have the higher end growers. But with respect to those who are growing, they're just going to decide which markets they want to play in, and they'll make sure their plants will test to those markets, right? California drives emissions in the United States. Why? Because their standards are many times higher than the federal standards, but no car manufacturer wants to not sell in California. So they build their cars to pass California emission standards. You'll see the same thing happening with cannabis. I mean, my prediction was you'll fly out to the West Coast, buy your product, get it lab tested to make certain that it meets your state's requirements. Then you'll fly it back into the state, get it retested locally to show that it does, and then get it entered into your system of record. And I believe that's going to happen. I think it'll be here in 2023. But I'll tell you what, I'd really be interested to hearing from this panel, Jimmy, is what does everybody think what are going to be the big stories that we're going to talk about this time next year?
Ah, that's a good one. Josh, you want to go first on that?
This time next year.
That's a good title for a movie, isn't it? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more states regulating cannabis. I think they're probably past safe banking. There's going to be an incredible amount of consolidation, a lot more cannabis lounge rollouts. All of those things are probably what we're going to be talking about next year.
Hey, Doug, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think a lot more consolidation. Some of the MSOs, bigger ones, we might be talking about how they are going out, and unfortunately, some of the smaller companies are going to follow as well. But I think that's going to be a big talk for next year. I hope it's the Banking Act passed. That would be amazing.
We want the banking and 280E to go away. That will cure a lot of the ills in the industry, at least in my stupid business brain. Rick, what do you think for next year?
After listening to Morgan talk about the upcoming legislature, I'm uncertain we're going to get anything on a federal level. So I think we'll be talking about regional compacts that exist between states for mutual commerce and transfer of cannabis across lines. That's been discussed for a couple of years. There's been an effort made to try and make it happen. I think somebody finds a way to get that done in 2023, and then that's a game changer for those regional players who have contiguous borders.
And who am I missing? Aaron, you want to talk about 2023? Go ahead.
A massive amount of closures.
Yep.
I believe there's going to be an epic amount of counterparty risk that no one in this industry has fully evaluated, has even quantified, in my opinion. Also, I do believe at this point next year, we're not going to be talking about oversupply. We're going to be talking about demand destruction. Everyone in this industry is always hyper-focused on the supply side of the equation, but no one has yet to try to quantify the demand side of the equation. And when you look at some place like Massachusetts, for example, we have an oversupply that's going to exacerbate now that Rhode Island and Connecticut and soon to be New York are coming on board. That demand, the real demand in Massachusetts is significantly lower than what the sales figures show. So if you think that as an operator now, you might be okay, give it a few more months. Once Rhode Island residents start buying more in Rhode Island and Connecticut, right, in Connecticut, that demand is not as big as what we think it really is. And I think the Treasury is going to be very shocked. And I think a lot of operators are going to be very shocked as well. And you're going to see a massive amount of closures, and you're going to see the rise of the distressed asset class.
David, you're already saying, yep.
Well, here's what I think the big stories are going to be. There's going to be several MSOs that are going to go out of business. They're just going to tip over and they're not going to be able to make it. Mm-hmm. I think the precipitating event is going to be interstate commerce. I think it's going to be more than just regional packs. I think that and I don't even think we're going to need regional packs. I think it's just going to be what's going on with Jefferson Packing House. I'm about to file a petition with the Mass Cannabis Control Commission, pushing them to have some sort of provision in the regulations to provide for interstate commerce. How do you buy from an out-of-state supplier, and how do you sell to somebody out of state? And if they say no, all it's going to take is somebody to sue the commission. All you need to do is take the Jefferson Packing House suit and change a few names on it and file it in Boston. I think there'll be a number of players, even small players, that are going to go out by April or May. The big thing everybody's going to be talking about, instead of like interstate commerce and ATM machines, is going to be restructuring. You're going to see a tremendous amount of restructuring because cannabis firms cannot avail themselves of bankruptcy. And when you start to look at these cultivation facilities, right? Somebody who owns a cultivation facility, if they run into a problem and they can't pay their mortgage on it because the person they're leasing it to can't pay the bill, they can't go into bankruptcy either because their revenue stream is coming from a drug trafficker. And a bankruptcy judge will say, I can't confirm a plan for you. So we're going to be talking a tremendous amount of restructuring, which is what Aaron's talking about with people going out of business. And I think you're going to see that the wind is going to be let out of the New Jersey and New York markets when all of a sudden they can buy product in Massachusetts. They're not going to get the same crazy run up that we had in Massachusetts that lasted for so long. Right.
Cost per pound. Go ahead.
I was in a dispensary 2 weeks ago, Jimmy. They had to go to the back room 3 times to get me 2/8 that were lab tested no later than September. The first one they brought out was lab tested in March and packaged in September. The other 2 they got were lab tested in September, packaged in November. That's not too bad, but you talk to legacy folks, they'll tell you the product is after about 8 to 10 weeks, it begins to degrade, loses its potency. And I hear stories all the time about product that has been tested 8 months ago, 9 months ago, sometimes a year ago.
It's called demand side issues. That's what that's called. There's not enough pull through. So you have no inventory turn. So it's going to sit there and be stale. But I also just want to piggyback real quick on what David said, interesting about interstate commerce. I know that we see this as a holy grail of everything that's going to happen. We also have to understand that cannabis lacks a lot of knowledge from other industries. Right now, I'm in the supply chain side of the industry right now, not in cannabis, but outside of it, just because I think that's where the new opportunity is going to lie once you have federal legalization. Just because blue sky laws collapse and we can now do interstate commerce does not mean that cannabis industry even has the knowledge for procurement, for transport, to go through the entire supply chain, materials movement, and all the way down to your production floor. I'm saying this because I understand these elements. If you don't actually understand how to manage your supply chain, which there is no knowledge in this space right now, it is going to cost you a fortune to get product from California to Massachusetts, just because you don't have the years and years of knowledge that other industries already have in that space. Industries are throwing an insane amount of money at the supply chain right now after what they've seen over the past couple of years. And cannabis is so behind the curve on that, so behind. So interstate commerce would be great, but if you don't have the talent in there to get it to you cheaply, you can double your price at what you paid for that commodity just to get it over here to Massachusetts.
I look at the security issues of it, and
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Just such a high risk and liability that it's just going to cost a fortune. You're going to need to hire security teams just to travel with it, because if not, it's just going to be constantly missing. Somebody's going to be taking something.
And I don't see this industry actually getting to the size that it could ever get in the absence of a clearinghouse. When I used to be a derivatives trader, and any trade that I'm doing, whether on one side of it and somebody's taking the other side of it, you have something in the middle called OCC, or Options Clearing Corporation. They take away that counterparty risk. So if the other side of my trade falls down, they're going to step in and make that trade whole. We don't have that in cannabis. So even with interstate commerce, there's still going to be massive amounts of counterparty risk. And until you remove that counterparty risk, there's always going to be that premium multiple that you're going to place on anything that you do in cannabis. That's the number one risk that has to get removed in this industry. If somebody's going to be smart enough to set up a clearinghouse that's going to take the other side of the trade, whoever does that is going to make a fortune in this industry.
And everybody's trying to make a fortune in this industry, but I don't know. Have people made money if you got in early at this point, guys, and then got out?
Mergers and acquisitions are all about making money. Oftentimes people cash out right now because they can see what's coming up.
Doug, you and I have talked about this privately. Recession, depression on the horizon here in the United States, and impact on the cannabis industry?
Well, I keep saying we're in a recession. You can't change the definition. So we're we're absolutely in a recession and we're heading straight for a depression. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, Goldman Sachs is laying people off, everyone in the cannabis industry, but every sector across the board is about to see major layoffs in 2023. And it's going to get ugly. I mean, we should see one last run in the stock market. Things should pop one more time. They've been trying and they can't even do that. They should have ran for the last 3 weeks and they still can't. So I'm interested to see what the new year will bring if we do get a quick run. But yeah, I'm not expecting a whole lot of economic
recovery.
Yeah, anything positive in 2023. Let's put it that way.
All right. Hey, Josh, you wanted to add something there because you agree with Doug at this point on the recession and depression thing, huh?
No, I was just rooting him on because you can't change it's 2 quarters of negative GDP that makes a recession. A depression is 6 quarters, and you can't change that no matter how hard you want to. So we're already there, and that
Summer
price
2022, it went in. It literally went into a recession, and they tried to change the definition. You can't change a definition. And as I always say, I'm a big chart person. Charts don't lie. They just do not lie. They'll get manipulated, but they never lie.
That's why we had Josh's charts at the beginning of this show. We do have 2 very special new people that just joined us. And one has been a regular viewer of this show, constantly in the chat room. All right. And the other is a guy in Illinois who covers the Illinois scene, but he's also been a very successful podcaster, attorney, and is building a new place. I think he's building a new office for himself. His name's Thomas Howard. Hi, Thomas. How are you?
Hi, reporting from a bunker. Guys, how are you? Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Oh, no. This is great. And, it's really a thank you to everybody for committing to this and coming in on a Friday afternoon. Week before Christmas and New Year's, of course. And Miggy also he's the answer to a trivia question. And I'm not sure. Let me think. Anybody here no, I don't know if they'll know this. But when we went to MJ BizCon in 2019, I'm pretty sure it was, we rented out, or we had access to a call-in live studio. And Miggy, I'm pretty sure, was the first caller that we were able to take live in this show. And that's something I will never, ever forget.
What's up?
How you doing, man?
I'm surrounded by all kinds of greats. What's up, dudes?
That's right. Great to see you. Great to see you.
Yeah. Cheers.
And I asked the doctor, leave me alone, to join us too, but I have not seen him. He has not communicated with me, so it's difficult to get him a Zoom link. I definitely want to get both of yours opinions on what we've been talking about: interstate commerce, recession, the implosion, market correction, all those neat things that we have been talking about in the cannabis industry. But I want to take our 30-minute break now and then come back for a full 30. And you guys, we'll start with you right off the bat. So don't go away. We'll continue with Green Rush Live after this.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is the rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years, and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young, and you're probably wondering, what am I doing on a growing show? After all, I'm a convicted plant killer. That's why I surround myself with these beautiful plastic babies. But now I have found the secret to all those people out there who just don't want to deal with growing a plant indoors or outdoors. You just don't have enough confidence. Hey, check out greengoddesssupply.com. That's where you'll find the armoire system. Basically, it's growing for dummies like me. Check it out. The Armoire at greengoddesssupply.com.
I know how to do this.
All righty then. Welcome back to the final half hour of Really Live Green Rush, the Business of Cannabis talk show. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometime host on this program. We're here every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m., but we won't be here for the next few weeks. Our next Really Live show will be January 6th on Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel, and we will at that time give out the results of our poll this is the first time we've ever done a poll, and it is the top 5 news stories of 2022 in the cannabis industry. And you can go, I'm pretty sure now that we've released it, you should be able to find it on our website. You should be able to find it on some of our LinkedIn page and all that neat stuff. And if you can't, before I leave the office tonight, I'll make sure that we've posted it in all those locations so you can get involved with this, enter the contest, and maybe even win one of our limited edition t-shirts and a gift card. Now, as I mentioned on the other side of the break, 2 gentlemen, one, Miggy, you're out in Washington State, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
And are you in the same neighborhood as Josh?
We're like we used to be neighbors until I moved.
That's right. And Thomas Howard is here as well. Cannabis Legalization News is his show every Sunday afternoon. Thomas, go ahead, give yourself a plug on your Sunday afternoon show.
Tune in on Sunday where we're going to be going over the top 5 news stories of cannabis in 2022. That's right. The gang recycles your trash, guys. Sometimes you come on the podcast to do another podcast. But no, I mean, tune in. We have a great time, and we go over the week in cannabis legalization. And then we have a little bit of fun. And so now we've been splitting the show up. And so if you guys want to come on the podcast, you'd be on 420 Somewhere, our deep dive into the cannabis industry with a guest. And then that's more of our sponsorship type of thing. And then I use the YouTube channel to do SEO based stuff. I just had some manufacturer of hydroponic stuff wanting me to like do a video for that. I don't get into that type of stuff too much, but you know, it happens when you're doing YouTubes.
Your show was terrific. I enjoyed it, and I'm going to give you a really big compliment, okay? Because not only do you host the show, but you're also the video director through StreamYard. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm pushing a whole bunch of buttons while I'm doing the show.
There is no freaking way I would ever be allowed to push buttons on this kind of a show, okay? There's just no way. So I appreciate, I respect your technical savvy on that one. Miggy joins us as well. And Miggy, in the chat room, you brought up a story. I know I've read about this, let's talk a little bit about the Cowboy Cup controversy. If you can, give us a little background on it, and then we can get into it a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really sparked my interest because that's what I do for a living. I work in quality, and so like this, and it's a big issue with cannabis, period, right? Talking about quality, and then as you guys talked about, like getting it grown in one state versus another state, right? Like, I always think it's kind of funny, right? It's like, what, people on the East Coast don't shit, right? Like, I mean, saying like there's this parity that we're like, this side is gonna be different than this side, but if you do it right and if you understand the plant and growing things, but and again, cost effectiveness is always gonna be a thing, but that's a business thing, right? I'm just talking about the plant. And so in Oklahoma, at the recent Cowboy Cup, I guess they brought in last year, they had issues, and you guys can fill me in. I didn't dig much into this because when it comes to quality and it comes to testing cannabis, you get into like the biology of things, and molds and pesticides. And, I'm very basic. I look at it, I'm like, all right, there's nothing strange in there, and there's no hairs that are not human or dog, and I'll smoke it. But like, people really get into it. And so they found a lot of things in some of the judges. They're questioning, did the mold occur when it left? Did it occur when it was like not transportation wise? And I kind of find it funny because in a regulated state market, that wouldn't even be a question. Like here in Washington State, right? It gets packaged and sits on the shelf, let alone set into a contest. So I just thought it was funny that, the quality, or at least people felt like their shit was being torn apart through other third-party testers. And I mean, it's just what it is. I didn't dig much after that. I don't know if you guys know more about the Cowboy Cup situation, but
well, it sounds like it's very similar to what we were talking about, the challenges of a testing lab, and when that testing lab comes out, and how fresh is the quality that they're testing, and is there a line that every testing lab has, and who goes over it, who doesn't, and are they actually, I don't know, perhaps something nefarious is going on with testing labs. I'd be shocked to hear that money might be changing hands and they may be doctoring some of those results. Well, Thomas, am I being a little, I don't know, crazy?
No, we have news stories all over the place about people doctoring. And then we haven't done that episode. We should do it because it's interesting how to cheat a testing lab to up your THC levels, how to commit fraud on your clients. Not the best business strategy. And you're actually seeing this as I'm a lawyer from that type of perspective. The lawyers are like, wait a minute. So they all want to say they have the most THC, so much so that they will lie about it. Sounds like we got a lawsuit on our hands, buddy. Might even be a class action if we do this right. And so we're seeing those out of California now. And then as other states come up and online, and then they're lying about their THC numbers, that's false. That's a misrepresentation designed to sell your product.
Hey, Mickey, call me crazy, but I bet it isn't the amount of THC that you should be deciding what you buy. Am I right on that?
Right. But in this situation too, it's not the THC that was being questioned, but it's the actual like molds and stuff being found in the actual plant matter. So the issue here really is handling of the plant, right? Like, did they put it in a nice dry area? Was it, it sounds like something grew that shouldn't have been there, but it's not THC levels. But when it comes to the THC levels, I know of labs that how they've done it is like fudge the numbers, right? So you got a gram of cannabis, and then they're like, oh no, that was actually a 0.8 grams. So now you just increased your THC percentage per that measurement. So there's different ways to cheat the system. But for me, working in the calibration industry, the lack of consistency is what's really shooting us in the foot here. To get to THC, there's different ways of doing it, right? Chromatography, spectrography, each one has a different little mathematical about it, and how do you come about it, right? Because as soon as you burn the plant, you're turning it to something else. So that's one factor in it. So if different labs are testing it in different ways, you're going to have different results as well sometimes.
Yeah. Hey, I know everybody was talking a lot about the shelf life of cannabis, and literally today I read a newsletter that I subscribe to. It's by Jackie Bryant. I don't know if any of you guys know who she is, freelance journalist, and now the editor of San Diego Magazine out of California. She's been on our show a few times over the last few years, and her newsletter is called The Cannabis. Okay, that alone got my attention, and I've certainly read some of her stories in the past. First of all, congratulations, Jackie, because she admitted and shared with the world that she is with child, and now she's going to take a tolerance break. And she actually goes into, in this today's newsletter, all the different ways to preserve the quality of cannabis and how best to do that, because after all, she's got a stash, just like a lot of people have. And she's not going to partake during her pregnancy. So first of all, congratulations, Jackie. Great column as always. If you don't know The Cannabis, I'm going out on a limb thinking if you Google Cannabis, the newsletter will come up and Jackie with it. So any of you people know Jackie by any chance? Anybody? Bueller?
No.
Okay, well, hey, look.
I'm not. Where's she out of?
San Diego, because she's the editor of San Diego Magazine.
Yeah.
And she's a terrific writer. She really is. The thing that brought us together is she did a story about a couple in Maine that are lobster people. I call them lobster people because it doesn't matter if you're male or female. The lobster is the lobster, and that's their livelihood. And they basically, the whole premise of the newsletter was they got their lobsters high, or do lobsters get high? And since that's my favorite food, that caught my idea. I read it. I thought it was really well written. We've had her on a couple of times. And again, I just read that today. So if you Google Cannabis, right, I'm pretty sure the newsletter is open for all. You can subscribe, obviously. And now, of course, she's soliciting fees to support her in her endeavors as well, like everybody in this industry is doing. Doug, I know I hadn't brought you in for a few minutes. I want to bring you back in here a little bit and get your opinions about some of the things that we've been talking about in our discussions here. How long is it going to take us to get out of this cycle of recession and perhaps depression? Are you willing to go out on a limb and put a time figure on that? And Josh, I'll go around the room and get it from you too.
I would say we're looking at a good year and a half before things start to get a little bit better. I tell everybody, be prepared for the next year and just make sure that you can get through it, because it's going to be rough. But yeah, at least a year and a half before the economy really starts to shift and change around. And then by that point, we'll be obviously having another election happen. So it'll probably be around the point when somebody else takes the White House, because this administration hasn't done hasn't been doing a whole lot of good, we'll say.
Right. We understand that. And we also understand that the outgoing governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, will not be running for president because he was not basically appointed and won the presidency of the NCAA. So we want to congratulate. Yes, Rick, I love that look. That's exactly what I said when I read it. I was like, Charlie Baker's going to try and fix the NCAA. Well, Rick, forget the call. You could comment on that if you want, but let's go back to my original premise. Are we seeing a recession, depression, and how long do you think that downturn of the economy will take place in 2023?
Seems like a big step up in pay scale from a governor to the head of the NCAA.
About 5 times. Yes.
Second thing is, I think cannabis is probably a not safe for work Google search based on what I know about those particular phrases in the OnlyFans network. So, you might want to just be more cautious about where and when you search for that particular thing. But as far as looking at the federal relief, Safe Banking Act has been so close so many times and has still disappointed us over and over and over again. Considering what we heard earlier today from Morgan Fox, I'm just discouraged by the thought of any federal relief, which means that any kind of resolution to problems is going to have to come on a state by state level, which means there'll be a lot of losers out there. There'll be a lot of people that really don't get the support that they need from the federal government. So I think we're looking at least 1.5 years to 2 years, as Doug mentioned, before we can really wipe the sweat from our brow, but it's going to be a really tough 16, 18, 20 months.
Hey, Josh, what's your feeling about it?
I think in order for the phoenix to rise from the ashes, it's going to take 3 to 5 years, and that's because a lot of the carnage needs to happen. And to Aaron's point about that counterparty risk, there's a lot of that has to fall out. And David had mentioned the $500 million in the top 10 MSOs in the U.S. owing taxes to the IRS. That is the canary in the coal mine. And it's not just here in the U.S. and Canada. They owe almost 75 million in the U.S. That's 172 out of 259 companies. 66% are struggling in Canada as well. So they may not owe as much to the federal government. What it's telling us is they are all failing, and they had first mover advantages. They played with other people's money at fairly low rates, and they still can't do it. So expect all of these mom and pops, 85%, to go out of business, but a lot of them still aren't paying themselves and able to kind of draw it out. So it's going to take about 3 years for that to really be obvious to anyone, and then a couple of years to develop a new market, a new connoisseur market that we're all patiently waiting for.
Patiently? I don't know about that, but we're waiting for it for sure. Thomas, what's your feeling about the downturn of the economy and its impact on the cannabis industry?
Well, I don't think it's going to be as bad as they say. I think it will be somewhat bad. And I don't know what's going to happen in 2024 because of the presidential election. The Safe Banking Act and federal resolution, federal guidance there, gone, completely gone. And then depending on how that 2024 election goes, could be gone for a lot longer. But, for right now, for the next 2 years, I'm hopeful that the results, and that's one of my top 5 stories, was Biden's executive action from October this year, the October surprise prior to the 2022 election. Another one of my top 5 stories, the 2022 election. I digress. But I think that he's going to have another October surprise come 2024, and they're going to announce the results saying, we recommend that in our next administration, we will reschedule in our next administration. And so they're saying hey, get rid of us at your own peril. And so do one of those things. But for the S&P, it's selling off hard. I think the bear market started 12 months ago, and then it has maybe about another 3 to 6 months, and then it's pretty much washed through unless China comes back, and then the war in Ukraine also resolves. Trying to keep ahead of inflation might take a little bit of time, but the market sold off pretty good. I just don't understand where in the fundamentals on the balance sheets of the American consumers, or even most companies, where are they going to be underwater, repriced how it was in 2008 with real estate, just taking all of real estate down 25%. Stocks reprice much quicker.
Speaking of stocks, that's Doug, my stock expert here. He's actually going to be joining the We Talk News team and give us a weekly stock report on cannabis stocks in under 90 seconds.
Nice.
What we ask. Right. Quick and dirty, people. I know how to produce content quick and dirty and how the importance is. Where are you going, Thomas? Okay.
And then you make it like this so that you do the 90 seconds. So you're on reels. They just keep changing the media. And so it's you get your hands on this one. I think we understand how this one works. And then they go, oh, you understand how it works, do you? And then they screw it up and they change it on you. Yeah.
That's a 16:9 ratio that we like to tell everybody to go horizontal. Doug, just feedback on what Thomas said about the market. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I sure hope it only takes about 3 months. I was saying earlier, I see a quick run happening. It should happen after the new year. They're basically at the bottom right now. They're going to go bottom top real quick, and then it's going to come crashing really hard, slow, and painful. And it's going to take a while.
Is this the East Coast skepticism I'm hearing here?
I just call charts how I see them. And I called it in 08. I called Bitcoin when it went from 60 to 20 to the hour, and I can tell you what these charts look like right now. Can anything change? Of course.
What's your resistance line on the S&P, or which are you following the Qs? You following the S&P? Which one are you looking at?
So I look at everything in general. I look at every sector across the board, and I can really call anything that's going to pop. And this is the scary thing. Generally, on average, I can hit 100 to 300 percenters a day that are going to spike. And in the last 5 to 6 months, I probably hit about 7, which is just unheard of. It's kind of sad. And I can just see the charts. They want to set up and run, and then they just fall down. They want to set up and run, then they get pushed back. They want to set up and run, they come crashing back down. Every time the Fed speaks, it's a disaster. It's a red day. And we had 2 green days this week. And on average, there should be 2 green, 2 red in a sideways day. And for the most part, they're not even 2 greens anymore. We happen to have 2 green days this week, but they followed real hard with bigger sell-off red days than they were bigger green days. So it's been a tough market.
Isn't Green Day a group?
Yeah, we need them to start singing.
I'm so unhip, guys. Hey, Mickey, I don't want to ignore you either. I want to get your feeling about. In fact, I'd like an optimist to come out of the woodwork and tell me that the recession and the depression on the horizon is going to be over quicker than we think. Give me something to grab onto.
Well, I like hearing Doug's take, and actually that's why I like working with Tom, like in Josh, like to me, I create a network of smarter people around me so I can understand the world around me. Doug, when you're talking about these ups and downs and sideways, are you talking about the actual stuff on the market already, the MSOs that are out there?
No, I talk about in general everything. See, the cannabis industry is very difficult. We spoke about it with Gary Santos, as a matter of fact, and the whole industry only fluctuates. The stock price goes up when the industry moves. So if there's industry news, all of them go. They're not based off of if one company does well. Their stock generally doesn't go up a whole lot.
Right.
And right now, obviously, they're not really. Their quarterlies aren't exactly beautiful to be making them go up, but at the same time, when they were producing good numbers, it would only be the whole sector would move. You would see Curaleaf and Hexo, all of them go the same day, and then they would all come down at the same time too. It's just an industry thing, and it's not based off of companies or basically anything.
Well, I find it because we use the word industry, but we're still talking about this federally illegal plant that there's no one stable industry, right? We have 50 different little industries that are going on. And then I'm like, how many burners are out there? There's only one. There's only one burner that I can name. The rest are True Leaf and whatever the hell they are. But to your point, Jimmy, nothing is inflation proof, right? We all got to pay for gas and do the thing that we do. But some stuff is recession proof. And that's what I've been talking with Tom. It's like we went through the pandemic with COVID. Cannabis was made essential. So you're talking about a prohibition plant. People are going to be hemming and hawing. And really, I do feel for people in the industry, but as a consumer, this is still a win-win for me still, until I get some home grow and maybe some home delivery, but, it's still better than going to a street dealer.
Is it though? Is it these days, guys? I mean, the street dealer, the legacy market is thriving thanks to the mistakes, the bumps in the road of the legal rollout. Thomas, I know you have something to say.
Well, I think Massachusetts is doing it okay. I think New Jersey's doing it okay. It's one of these deals where it should be more like liquor and less like plutonium. And gambling is now pervasive and everywhere. You can't go. I bet that we get interrupted in 5 seconds for a commercial to make a bet in Vegas, because that's how much gambling has come. Like, I remember when I was a child and, years ago, it was illegal. You'd have to go to Vegas for gambling. Now it's everywhere. And so that kind of direction is coming for cannabis. But when will it shake itself out and have like some type of normalcy? Decades. It's going to take decades, because you're having everybody do it their own way. And then when everybody does it their own way, it's really hard to have interstate commerce and standards. So you're going to have the Fed speak to it for some type of regulatory consensus amongst the states. And they did that with hemp, and they still don't have the DEA approved testing that they put into it. And that's years later. And so like we might have legalization and it's still freewheeling, for many more years after that. And then they'll eventually come up with regulations, and it'll be just like owning a restaurant or a bar or a cracker factory that needs to comply with federal food regulations.
Yeah. Rick, do you echo those comments by Thomas by any chance?
Yeah, I sure do. In fact, you're going to see a lot of state-based actions because there will be a lack of federal oversight. And all the things he mentioned, standardization, a normalization, some kind of an agreement between states, those are necessary steps before interstate commerce can happen, which I think pushes the implementation date for that off a little bit further. But the pain is felt locally. The recession is felt locally. It may be a national phenomenon, but it's always been the local companies, the mom and pops that suffer for it.
Wow. I'm really not
Maybe
looking
the recession will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, because all the economic downturn, everybody will realize, well, we have to legalize it now federally, to get us out of the recession.
Now you're talking. Now I like that idea, because I think I just read another news story about a state or somebody is allowing starting to put money into hemp as a building material. Did I not see that somewhere? But we all know it can be a building material, and I know I saw a change in the direction of hemp, and they're starting to recognize all the positives that this plant can deliver to not just our economy, but our environment too, guys. I mean, it seems to me, if we put some research into that plant, like we're supposed to be doing now, they're going to see all sorts of. I know I saw Henry Ford make a car out of hemp in my history of hemp presentation. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, actually, that car's still at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. So.
See that? All those little things about Michigan that I knew somewhere in the back of my mind would come out. Well, guys, listen, everybody on this call and everybody in this Zoom room and who has taken part today, all of you very special in the story that continues, that is Pro Cannabis Media, our weekly Weed Talk news show. A couple of correspondents are on with us right here, and I really am proud of the effort that news producer Tori Chamberlain has put in, Elena Pinto, who I think is a network quality anchor. And why she's working for us after a year is beyond me, but we love her for that reason alone. And the same thing with you, Thomas and Rick and Josh as well. And I look forward to our cannabis reports in 2023 from the market, Doug, because it's obvious, you know what you're talking about, and I don't. Okay, so you're definitely going to be added to the team, and I appreciate that. And Miggy, you get the fan of the year every year, as far as I'm concerned. You do? You're there almost every Friday in the chat room, and we so appreciate that.
I'm actually at work. That's why I can maybe have you guys.
That's awesome.
That is the way to go too, by the way. And I love that you get your earpiece in and nobody knows, but we do. All right. So this is my big holiday wrap-up speech. We've had a few 100,000 views of our videos over the last year. I think we're up to like 280 for the year, maybe closer to 300. And I'm amazed that this old white guy can talk about weed and weed business and actually get a following. Hey, who knew? That's why this country is so great, because we can talk about it and we can also share some of our knowledge with our audience. Last wishes. I'm going to go around the room one more time. Last wishes for 2023. Josh, what can we look forward to in your world? I appreciate everything you've done for us.
Oh, last wishes? I don't know. Get out more. Go to an event that you haven't been to.
I love that. I love that. Step out. Doug, what's your thought for 2023? And I'm not saying these are, New Year's resolutions. I'm just saying, give me a positive thought.
I was going to actually say, just have positive energy. It's all about having a positive attitude for everything. Yeah, the economy may not be the greatest. There's always a great opportunity for something, as long as you have your eyes open and you're paying attention and you're positive. That's how things happen.
Love that. Rick Thompson.
Cannabis social equity programs. I really hope that people find a way to make them work in different states, and then that success solution is emulated across the nation.
Isn't that a nice thought? Thomas?
Oh, well, I really hope that we can see you guys out there at the trade shows. I really wasn't out very much this year, and I felt bad about that. But I had to run a company, and now I feel like it's going to go out of business next year.
Oh, God, no. Don't say that. Don't say that. Speaking of trade shows, Miggy, hold your thought. I don't know if you guys saw the news item, but friend of Pro Cannabis Media, Chris Walsh, the CEO of MJ Biz Daily, is now the ex-CEO of MJ Biz. He has resigned and moved on, and we don't know where and what he's doing. However, you know, we wish him well because they've been great towards us over the years. And I guarantee this last MJ BizCon will be the last one I'm not at least I think so, if I live so long. Mickey, tell me a positive thought to send us off into 2023.
Yeah, by the way, we had him on the show, and really nice guy. But
he is a great guy.
I am looking forward to, hopefully the DOJ and DOH have a statement next year, right? I mean, there's been a directive laid out there. Come on, let's get this, because it's not McConnell.
That's right. It's just a federal agency, right? Just the federal agency, right? All right. Hey, once again, for everybody who works on this show, Dan French and Isabel Turner, I so appreciate the work you put in for all of us here. Remember, it is a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Coming up on We Talk News this week, the clock is ticking down on safe banking or any federal reform for cannabis before the end of the year. Meanwhile, the cannabis industry braces for contraction. And the founders of CRM software giant Dutchie sue their own board over their attempts of a takeover. Speaking of lawsuits, Trulieve lays off workers and then they start a class action suit against the multi-state operator. And Michigan and Massachusetts see flower prices declining below $100 an ounce. Reports from those states and around the world on We Talk News with Elena Pinto. Next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last edition of We Talk News for 2022. I'm Elena Pinto reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. From everyone here at PCM, we hope your holiday season is the best ever. Well, news from the cannabis industry continues to be one of paralyzation at the federal level and doom and gloom in many states. In Washington, D.C., the hope for reform being introduced by this lame duck Congress is waning as the government itself tries to maintain operations going into the final week of the year. Last week, safe banking was deleted as an amendment to annual bills to support national events. And so now what? Is it wait till next year, or is there any hope for any federal reform of cannabis laws and regulations this year? Software company Dutchie is a perfect example of some of the challenges of being in the cannabis industry. Even though they are considered one of the most successful companies in this space, valued at over $1 billion, their founders were ousted by the board of directors and now are suing the current operators. Green Market Report's Deborah Borchardt has that story.
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. This week, we learned that Dutchie founders, brothers Ross and Zachary Lipson, are suing the company. In November, it was reported that they were leaving Dutchie, but neither contributed a quote to the press release, so that should have been a red flag. Now the two say they were improperly kicked out of the company by the current board, and they're insisting they're still directors and officers of Dutchie. They claim they were ambushed at the November board meeting during a board coup. The court documents are sealed, but we will keep trying to get more information on this story. We also got some earnings announcements this week. Fire & Flower announced its fiscal 2022 third quarter revenue increased 8% sequentially to $43.8 million, but revenue did fall by 3% from last year's third quarter. They also delivered a net loss of $28 million. Hexo posted earnings that beat revenue expectations as they continue restructuring. The Canadian producer said that they had net revenue of 35.8 million Canadian dollars in the first quarter, but that was down 29% over last year. The company said that the decline was attributable in part to severe weather that kept certain shipments from reaching their destination. And those are the top stories this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report, and this has been your business update for Weed Talk News.
Another one of the challenges in the legal cannabis industry is where to consume it. Even in legal states, public consumption is still limited to private residences. If you own and if you rent, you are required to head outside and off property, whether you are consuming for medicinal reasons or recreational. New Jersey is one of the newest adult use states, and they are starting to figure out how to handle this very problem. Joe Goldsberry has the latest on social clubs and public consumption in the Garden State.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jill Goldsberry for Weed Talk News New Jersey, and there are some new developments I want to tell you guys about around the discussions on marijuana banking in states. While previously Republicans controlled the Senate, the House passed the Secure and Fair Enforcement Act, Banking Act, several times, the AKA Safe Banking Act, and the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, the MORE Act, was also passed. Mitch McConnell has refused to bring up either of these acts for votes. As it stands, when Senators Schumer, Booker, and Senate Finance Chair Ron Wyden of Oregon introduced the comprehensive legislation known as the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, they were not able to secure the 10 votes needed to actually oppose McConnell. So this has been an ongoing problem, which has presented the opportunity for ongoing bipartisan negotiations by Republican U.S. Senator Steve Daines. The goal here now is to satisfy Booker's restorative justice provisions while also garnering enough GOP senators to pass the bill. So Representative Brian Matt of Florida has chimed in on his thoughts regarding this. He doesn't think that Mitch McConnell is interested in bringing this up, and he doesn't think he will. So that remains to be seen. The most impactful part of the Safe Banking Act will enable banks to offer checking accounts, credit cards, and other financial services to legal cannabis business owners, which will solve a lot of problems in state because now they're forced to operate in cash or at check cashing places, making them easy targets for bank robberies and other types of burglaries. So insiders are hopeful that the marijuana bill can be added to the spending legislation refunding for the government through September 30th, 2023. That remains to be seen. We shall see. In other news, it looks like New Jersey may be ready to start allowing for public consumption spaces. Woohoo! And the CRC has approved new rules on this. They're mainly related to public consumption areas, fee structures for applications, and more. Interested business owners can go to the New Jersey Register for more information. I'm Jill Goldsberry, and this has been Weed Talk News New Jersey.
For many years, California was the undisputed #1 cannabis market on the legal and legacy side, but the #2 slot was always up for grabs. Well, now a new state has grabbed that runner-up spot. Drum roll, you can do it on your own. It's Arizona, with $1.6 billion in sales revenue in 2021. That also generated $221.3 million in cannabis tax revenue for the state. Well, both of those figures are supposed to be passed once the 2022 numbers are released. And so far, that state is averaging about $22 million in tax revenue generated for the first 9 months of 2022. As for California, they are still #1, now at over $7 billion of legal sales of cannabis, the biggest market in the world. As for one of the other legal West Coast states, here's Josh Kincaid with the Washington State Report.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Presentations on public health surveys by researchers from Canada and Oregon gave the Liquor and Cannabis Board insight into how Washington's system compares to other legal cannabis jurisdictions. So dried flower is the most commonly used product in Washington state, with 71% of consumers preferring flower. Edibles came in second, 64% of survey respondents citing edibles as their go-to cannabis product. And rounding out, number 3 is vape carts at 46%. Notice concentrates isn't there at all. Every time I go into a store and ask bud tenders what their favorite product is, what's the number 1 product being sold, it's very, very rarely concentrate, which I find interesting. But looking at the significance of what all that means, it probably doesn't help farmers' cause when they claim to have high taxes, since the price in Washington is 25% lower than that of the legacy market. In 2021, for example, the price of dried flower reported by consumers in Washington was only $7.38, lower than the U.S. average on the underground market of $9.17. So this can create some diversion, especially during difficult economic times. An investment strategy known as arbitrage is when investors simultaneously buy and sell an asset in different markets and take advantage of that price difference and generate a profit. While price differences are typically small and short-lived, the returns can be impressive when multiplied by enough volume or frequency. So arbitrage is commonly used by hedge funds and other sophisticated investors. In this example, arbitrage is when cannabis is bought in Washington at $7.38 and gets diverted to New York for $9.94. Maybe the presentation to Washington's regulators should have been the importance of legalizing interstate commerce before incentivizing coast-to-coast cannabis arbitrage. Next week, you guys are going to find out more about Washington State's cannabis scene. But with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Heads, reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Retail prices for cannabis continue to drop in other states, including Massachusetts and Michigan. In Michigan, the price for an ounce is now under $100. In fact, it was just 1 year ago in November when prices for an ounce of flower in Michigan were $191 per ounce. So when will that market bottom out? Well, the executive director of NORML for Michigan, Rick Thompson, has more from the Great Lakes state.
Hello again. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. November sales of cannabis fell slightly behind those in October, but the drop was small and can be accounted for by November having 1 fewer day than October. When medical and adult use sales are combined, the dip in the numbers was only 2.9%, yielding $203.4 million. Individually, adult use retail sales were down 2.3% at about $190 million, and the poor medical marijuana program slipped another 9.9% from last month, down to only 13.6 million. Also down, the average sales price of cannabis in Michigan retail stores. Medical marijuana sells for, on average, $102 per ounce, and an adult use ounce is down to $95. The adult use market moved about 71,000 pounds of flower and shake, while the medical program sold only 4,500. Vape carts, still solidly the number 2 product behind flower in Michigan, with concentrates and edibles both having nearly identical sales in the adult use market in November. Well, Crane's Detroit Business Magazine published a group of 4 articles related to cannabis on Monday. Included were 3 op-eds and 1 piece of journalism. The article focused on the need to curtail unregulated market cannabis from entering the regulated marketplace, and the tough sledding all cannabis licensees are enduring in Michigan right now. Now, one guy who is not singing the blues, Common Citizen CEO Michael Elias, who said he's happy times are tough, and his company is busily gobbling up all those well-placed but financially struggling cannabis retailers like an old school hungry hippo game. Now, one of those op-eds was from Greenhouse of Walled Lake's CEO, Jerry Millen, who said a crackdown on the cheaters in the industry is warranted, and new director of the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, Brian Hanna, is the guy to do it. The second op-ed was penned by Shelley Edgerton, who is the best example of why we have to keep regulators and industry far apart. She is the spokesperson for the hated trade group, the MCMA, and her piece centered around using the Cannabis Regulatory Agency to crack down on illegal market operators and to push a new proposed moratorium on issuing any licenses to new commercial cultivation centers. Now, that would screw over any Detroit plans to progress forward and put at a further disadvantage all the social equity applicants statewide who've been patiently waiting for a chance to get into the market. The final op-ed was written by Mr. Hanna himself. Hanna discussed his personal history of growing up in the Metro Detroit area, his time as a combat veteran, and the need to slam the door on misbehaving cannabis entities in Michigan. A revolutionary new poll came out last week, sponsored by Normal of Michigan, and was conducted by the Epic MRA polling service. 600 respondents were asked the question, do you want to see the state's current medical marijuana program stay the same? Would you like to increase rights and privileges for medical cannabis patients? Or would you like to take away rights and privileges from those medical patients? The greatest response was from those who want no change, which composed 41% of the responses, followed by those who want to increase the rights for cannabis patients at a 25% response rate. Now, together, those two responses indicate 66%, or 2/3 of the state, want the medical program to stay the same or be improved. Only 21% of respondents wanted to roll back rights for sick people, and 13% were undecided or chose to not respond. Let's break down the support and opposition to the idea of expanded medical rights for the state's most ill and injured. The greatest percentage of support for adding protections and rights for medical cannabis patients comes from liberals at 43%, Black voters at 41%, those who claim no religious affiliation at 40%, women aged 18 to 49, they supported 36%. Now, those respondents who earn between $75,000 and $100,000 per year, Democratic men, and young voters from 18 to 34 support at 35%, statewide average 25%. The largest amount of support for restricting medical marijuana access to patients comes from those who self-identify as members of the pro-life movement. They support restricting medical marijuana laws at 40%, nearly double the statewide average of 21%. Republican women registered 36% support for further restrictions. On the other side, Democratic women support restricting medical cannabis laws at the lowest percentage in the survey at only 8% versus that statewide 21% average. The 35 to 49 years age group had very low support for restrictions at 9%, as did women aged 18 to 49. Men and women seem to support relaxing the medical marijuana laws at 26 and 24% respectively, and for curtailing those laws equally. Now, full disclosure, I am the executive director at Normal of Michigan. Well, the city of Mount Clemens has a problem. 2 cannabis retail centers have opened in their city, yet Mount Clemens never authorized either of them. But the state did. Now, this is a crazy story that starts early in 2022. Mount Clemens began a licensing process, issuing licenses, but then faced such legal backlash, they decided to scrap the whole cannabis business program. Now, the city had already issued several companies their retail licenses, and the Cannabis Regulatory Agency followed through and issued those companies their state licenses to operate. All of this before the city dropped their program. Now, despite the fact that the 2 companies no longer have local authority to operate, the state regulatory agency cannot rescind their operating license. Mount Clemens is exploring their legal options to shut down both the Jars and Pleasant Tree stores. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
Here in the Bay State, flower prices continue to decline to less than $100 an ounce as well. It's great news if you are a consumer, not so much if you're a business owner. We Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain breaks it down in the Bay State Report.
Hey guys, I'm Tori Chamberlain, and here in the Bay State, the retail price of cannabis for adult use continues to plummet. Back in October, the average price for a gram of cannabis dropped to an all-time low of about $7.76. Now, it's since rebounded to a little over $8 per gram, but that's still far below the price that the market is used to seeing. Now, it's great news for consumers who are looking to get a deal on an ounce or their favorite flower, but it really hurts farmers and companies on the back end of things. And the other interesting thing actually is that the most recent numbers show that sales revenue is actually down in Massachusetts as well. So maybe with the surplus of supply, there's not quite as high of a demand right now. And you have to keep in mind that several states that border Massachusetts have just come online with their own legal markets. So maybe there was some demographic of consumers and purchasers that were coming across state lines that no longer have to do that. Either way, it's certainly interesting to see the turn that the market is taking here in Massachusetts after 5 years of legalization. And we'll have to watch in 2023 to see how these companies respond and if the numbers change at all. In the meantime, be sure to take time to go out of your way, seek out those small, locally owned brands, and be sure to support them with your dollar. For now, that's the Bay State Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Tori Chamberlain.
While a lot of the news from the cannabis industry in the US continues to support a market correction, in Europe, prohibition continues. Many countries are still just trying to get the plant decriminalized for its medicinal effects. In our European report this week, Lex Pelger has the sad story of an Irish grower who tried to do the right thing, but got raided and sent away for 5 years.
Hello, I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. A hard week for cannabis in the European Union. Aside from Spain starting to draft its medical cannabis laws, we've got negatives across the board. In business news, Euroclear, one of the EU's 2 major stock clearinghouses, will no longer support cannabis-related stocks from anywhere in the world. They are forcing customers to sell all of their cannabis shares. As you can imagine, this is causing carnage in the sector. In the UK, a report by the drug policy think tank Voltface finds that despite there being 1.8 million people using cannabis for medical purposes, only 15,000 of them are legally prescribed patients. That means 99% of UK patients must find an illegal source for their medicine. The report describes a critical lack of understanding about cannabis-based medicines among doctors. Meanwhile, reports come out of the UK of children with epilepsy losing access to their medicine, and patients with a variety of conditions struggling to find a safe source in the black market. Even worse is in Ireland. A father of 2 named Patrick Moore was just sentenced to 5 years in prison for the cultivation and supply of cannabis. Most of the cannabis oil he produced was being donated to severely ill patients. His home was raided by 15 cops carrying automatic weapons, and they found a grand total of 19 cannabis plants, 3 seedlings, and some bags of trim. The judge seemed to be moved by reports from family members of patients with conditions like Huntington's disease and childhood leukemia, but all she could do was give him the lightest possible penalty. And now Patrick Moore will be separated from his wife and children for the next several years for the crime of growing medicine. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations, reporting for Weed Talk News.
New Hampshire continues to be surrounded by states in New England that have legalized the sale, possession, and growing of cannabis. But the Live Free or Die state continues to drag its feet toward change, and now a bipartisan committee of legislators will introduce a new adult use bill in 2023. The bill will create an adult use market in that state where you can possess and gift up to 4 ounces of cannabis, home grow 3 plants, and it'll introduce a state licensed set of dispensaries for sale to adults over 21. There will also be an 8.9% sales tax imposed on all sales. But right next door to New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Green Mountain State opened its adult use dispensaries this year. Well, Jessie Lynn Dolan has our Vermont report.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Thursday, December 15th, Vermont Growers Association, a grassroots nonprofit advocacy group, held a lively community discussion entitled "The Market is What We Make It," with local manufacturers and policy professionals about the challenges currently facing manufacturers in the adult use market. The Cannabis Control Board met this week, approving 9 new licensees, including 2 social equity and economic empowerment applicants. The board presented a summary of their 80-plus page paper that will be submitted to legislators regarding eliminating THC caps for concentrates, as well as discussing removing the exorbitant vape tax, which is meant to and should stay as a tax for nicotine only. The Cannabis Control Board cannot make these changes without legislators, so now is the time for Vermonters and businesses to speak up and back up eliminating these nonsensical statutes. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
And finally tonight, hope for the future. NORML released results from some research that shows that nearly 2 million convictions for cannabis-related crimes have been expunged or pardoned over the past few years. So yes, there is a difference between those two legal terms, but at least there is positive movement. The Department of Justice is releasing a link to get your past conviction pardoned with a simple 10-minute form to fill out on their website in 2023. A feel-good way to end a tumultuous year in the cannabis industry. Well, now we want to know what you think were the biggest news stories of the year, and you can find that poll on our homepage at procannabismedia.com to share your thoughts. And we enter you into a contest for some gift cards and our limited edition t-shirts. They're t-shirts. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. Happy holidays from everyone here at Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Elena Pinto reporting. We will see you in 2023.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weejits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCM TV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weejits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist. but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps. I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission and the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.